Also, even if you didn't care about like the purity of art or like the ethics of using AI, I also feel like the art from AI is just so ass. Throughout this year, there have been several authors who have been caught leaving AI prompts in their books. Whenever this happens, people will message me asking to make a video about these incidents. But the problem is these aren't just isolated incidents. And because this is such a pattern, it would be redundant for me to make a video every single time an author does this. Even me making a video every single time an author pretends to be a different race is becoming redundant as well. Instead, I kind of want to use this as an opportunity to briefly go over some of the incidents, but look at this as a whole, because this is going to be a trending thing. AI is being pushed so aggressively by every tech company out there, and it is very tempting for a lot of writers to use AI as a crutch. So we can talk about more specific incidents, but I want to take like a broader look at this and talk more about the implications of this happening in writing specifically, and why are people doing this. Generally, people don't consider assistive AI as problematic as generative AI, which is essentially language learning models like ChatGPT that will scrape and pull different copywritten works, regardless of whether the creators of those works have consented to it, and compile it all together for whoever is typing in the query. This is why a lot of people say that AI is stealing from artists. You can argue that this is similar to artists taking inspiration from others, but I think that's just being obtuse on purpose, because a person taking inspiration from another artist is very much different from AI taking several different inspirations from several different artists and then combining it all together into a product that is very generic. Even using ChatGPT for really simple, trivial things like finding synonyms or researching something instead of using Google, I find to be kind of not really worth the efficiency that AI claims to give you. And it's certainly not worth it for all of the environmental costs. And overall, I think it's a very slippery slope into being used to constantly taking shortcuts when you're creating a piece of art that hopefully you are putting a lot of meaning and care into. I feel like some of the incidents that I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes is an example of how we have gone down that slippery slope. You get a little bit too careless with defaulting to ChatGPT as a solution to brainstorm or plot things, and then you start to rely on it to write entire passages, and then you get so used to taking shortcuts that you forget to remove the ChatGPT prompt from your draft. These are only cases where people have been caught, which means that there are probably way more people who are doing this but are just not sharing about it, or have some foresight to remove the prompt from their passages, or they might have editors who will be able to check these kinds of things, which is why we're seeing this become more rampant in the self-publishing indie space. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen to traditional publishing either. If you're like me and you want books written by humans and sold by humans, then I recommend PangoBooks, which is the sponsor of today's video. They are a great way to shop for books affordably and ethically. It's a platform where you can shop from other readers' shelves, which means that you're saving money, you're keeping books from the landfill, and you're supporting individual readers. So now instead of seeing generic stock photos, you're seeing the exact photos of the actual books that you're going to buy that the readers took. And that way you can verify what condition they're going to be in. And sometimes there's even cool special collector's editions, or they have other features like author signatures that are in them. I've been a seller on PangoBooks for several years now, and what I love to do is sometimes leave little bookmarks in the books, or if the buyer recognizes me from my channel and sends me a message, I'll write like a little note for them. And as a seller myself, it is extremely easy to sell books. All you need to do is scan the barcode and snap a few photos and you're done. You also can decide how much to charge for your books so that you can determine how much you're actually earning. And as soon as you make a sale, they send you a prepaid shipping label. So all you need to do is pack up the book and ship it out. So if you would like to try it out, you can download the app and start selling or buying today. And now let's get back to the discussion. All right, so let's take a look at some of the more notable incidents that have happened and use that as a launching pad to talk about the broader implications of AI in writing. So I think the most notable incident that we have seen this past year is from Lena McDonald. Lena is an author of a reverse harem romance and recently published a book called Dark Hollow Academy Year 2. But in the original published version of this book, readers stumbled across a passage that was clearly the result of using generative AI. They were reading a story when all of a sudden the passage was interrupted by a statement that says, "I've rewritten the passage to align more more with J. Bree's style, which features more tension, gritty undertones, and raw emotional subtext beneath the supernatural elements. In the digital version of the book, this passage has since been deleted, but it is already too late because tons of people took screenshots and that has spread across the internet. So it was generally known that this author did use AI when working on this book, specifically tailoring their query to try to mimic another author's style and putting certain moody things that they wanted to evoke in their writing instead of crafting it themselves. And so obviously there was backlash to this. They did issue an apology that says, "I want to openly and sincerely address something that's come to light regarding my book. A prompt was recently found in the text. It's something that should have never made it into the final version. I want to apologize deeply to my readers and to the writing community. The truth is I use AI to help edit and shape parts of the book. As a full-time teacher and mom, I simply can't afford a professional editor, and I turn to AI as a tool to help refine my writing. Teaching wages make it hard enough to support a family, and writing has been a passion project I pursued in the small pockets of time I could find. My goal was always to entertain, not to mislead. That said, the appearance of an editing prompt in the final book was a mistake, one that I take full responsibility for. It has unintentionally sparked a broader conversation about AI in creative work, and I understand the concerns. I'm taking this seriously and will be reviewing the book carefully, making corrections where needed, and being more transparent in the future about my process. To my readers, thank you for your support, your honesty, and your patience. I'm learning from this and will do better. To the wider community, I'm sorry." I'm glad that this person admitted to using AI and their mistakes, but the apology says that she uses AI for editing, and it didn't really address the fact that she was creating it from scratch. Allegedly. I mean, just based on how the prompt was written, it sounded like she asked ChatGPT to rewrite the passage in someone else's style, which I guess you could say is editing, but the lines are getting a little bit blurry now, and I think people are going to continue to toe the blurry lines of what constitutes as editing versus writing something from scratch. And then we also have another person named Casey Crown, who was also flagged for leaving AI prompts in her work, this time in a book called The Dark Obsession, which included a passage that says, "Certainly, here's an enhanced version of your passage, making Elena more relatable and injecting additional humor while providing a brief, sexy description of Grigori." Casey Crown's response to this when being called out was pretty similar to what Lena McDonald said, which was that she uses AI for minor edits, but all of her books are ultimately written by her. But that's not to say that traditional publishing and other avenues are safe from it either. For example, the Chicago Sun is a publication that recently used AI to generate a list of summer reads. And many people realize that this was AI because a lot of the recommendations for the books that are going to be coming out this summer don't actually exist. And then the author admitted to using AI to help write the article. Because there are no regulations for this kind of thing, it is open season for everyone. It's gotten to a point that even Amazon back in 2023 had to put a limit on the number of titles that authors could publish because there were so many authors out there that were just dumping a bunch of AI books that the majority of the books being offered on Amazon was just AI slop in a disproportionate way to books that were 100% written by authors. But then the limit that Amazon imposed was only 3 per day. So that doesn't really do much to prevent AI use. They included a step for authors to checkmark if they used AI when creating their book, but it appears to be more based on like an honor system because again, there's not really a way to check whether they actually did that behind the scenes unless again, they forget to remove the prompt when they publish their book. So when you have AI flooding the market, this disproportionately is going to affect marginalized authors, especially when it comes to self-publishing. Many marginalized people turn to that avenue because it is so difficult to get into traditional publishing with all of the barriers out there. So now you have another barrier, which is wading through all of the AI slop. Not only are you now trying to stand out as a marginalized author in this space, you now risk having your work scraped and stolen by AI or being mistaken as AI at the same time because it is so overflooded. An example of this is the sapphic fiction community. I've talked before in a previous video about male authors who co-opt pretending to be a lesbian in order to publish sapphic books, not in a way where they are genuinely exploring their identity, but in a way where it is clearly just profiting off of sapphics, and it's just another convoluted version of a scam. But with AI, it becomes even easier to scam on a massive level. I'll link in my description an article by J Fiction, which again, I will plug because they are a great resource when it comes to sapphic fiction, especially in the self-publishing and indie community. They wrote a really great post about this list where they found 439 sapphic books that they very strongly believed had been ripped off from other authors using AI. Because for over 80 of those books, they were able to identify the original books and had to alert the authors about it. Those 439 books were published by 41 different authors, I say in quotation marks. Even though those are technically 41 different names, it could very well be the same person or the same small groups of people because they follow very similar patterns. Jay was able to identify the originals because when you look at the blurbs of how these books were being pitched in terms of the plot, the summary, and the synopsis, they literally have the same phrases, but a couple of other parts have been rephrased. For example, the original book, The Princess Smash by Claire Lydon, says Princess Victoria has perfected the royal playbook, calculated smile, convenient boyfriend, impeccable press, but behind the tiara takes a heart that's tired of playing by the rules. Whereas we have a rip-off AI book that says Princess Evelyn lives by the royal playbook. Duty first, smile always, maintain the perfect image. Trapped by tradition and stifled by a convenient, passionless relationship with Lord Arthur, she secretly yearns for something real, something more. Going back to the original, it says, enter Ashley Woods, England's football captain, media darling, and living proof that authenticity scores every time. When Victoria pins an MBE on Ash's lapel, the instant chemistry jolts both their worlds. Then when we look at the AI ripoff, it says, Freya Brown, England's charismatic cricket captain, a powerhouse on the pitch and refreshingly authentic off it. When Evelyn pins an MBE on Freya's blazer, the connection is instant, electric, and utterly forbidden. And so on and so forth. I could read so many examples, but then this video would be way too long. But you can see some of the similarities here with literally the same phrases and the same structure for how these blurbs are put together. Obviously, there are common structures and tropes that books will have, but that's very different compared to a fake author that is using AI to scrape through hundreds of titles in order to quickly churn out a book title that they can easily and quickly sell. They're doing all of this without putting in any of the work. And whenever this happens, it always affects marginalized groups the most. So they are stealing from real books that are written by real women, real people of color, real non-binary writers who have all put in the time and effort to create these books, now reduced to just minutes of churning out this kind of story by someone who likely doesn't really know what it means to be part of that marginalized group. At least that's what I would suspect, since they don't have the respect of even writing their own story and having to lift off from other creators. So those are just examples of the different ways that we can descend into madness when it comes to AI, because you start off with a writer just using AI for editing purposes, maybe because they lack the finances to hire an editor or just don't have enough time on their hands. Then you get AI to rewrite passages altogether. Then you get AI to completely make up books altogether for you. And now you have AI just blatantly copying from other people so that they can churn out books more easily. So with so many writers and authors using AI now to publish their books, I found a really interesting survey from a site called BookBub where they surveyed over 1,200 authors. And this was a way to see how authors were currently thinking about AI in relation to their work. And so a lot of the opinions among the authors that they surveyed were really divided. I'm going to be sharing the results from the survey along with data charts, and I'll have this article linked in my description as well. But the results, if you were on the anti-AI team, it's very depressing. I do want to caveat that the survey is supposed to represent authors of publishing, but obviously there could be a self-selection bias and there could be convenience sampling. So the results here could be very skewed. Actually, it might be better for me to break down the respondents for this survey too. So 69% of respondents were self-published, 6% are traditionally published, and 25% have both self-published and traditionally published books. Specifically, 16% published their first book before 2010, 56% published their first book between 2010 and 2020, 24% published their first book between 2020 and 2023, and 4% published their first book within the last year. Most of these authors also write in popular fiction genres, with many writing in multiple genres. So we have 59% writing romance or rom-com, 56% writing fantasy, sci-fi, or horror, 35% writing mysteries, thrillers, or crime fiction, 22% writing historical fiction, literary, or women's fiction, 16% writing nonfiction, 15% writing teen, middle grade, or children's, and 7% writing in other genres. Again, remember these demographics demographics and the caveats before I share with you the depressing stats. I think one of the first things that really stood out to me though is of the authors who had used AI, 72% said that they did not disclose that they had used it. So this goes along with my theory that I was sharing earlier in the video that, yeah, we're seeing these isolated incidents of authors that got caught, but that's because they only got caught. Who knows the actual numbers of people who use AI in their writing and are willing to admit to that. Generally though, the authors that had been surveyed were split nearly evenly on AI use. About 45% are currently using generative AI to assist with their work, while 48% are not and do not plan to in the future. And then another 7% of respondents are not currently use AI, but might use it in the future. Of the authors who are currently using generative AI, 30% use it occasionally and 60% are using it frequently. So for authors who do not use AI, the primary reason for why that is the ethical concerns. The other top reasons are because they enjoy doing the work themselves and they don't think AI does a good job with the tasks that they would give it. This is the boat that I am in as well, because it's one thing to be unethical and shitty for the environment, but you're not even good at it. Like, what is the point? One of the quotes that stood out to me was, the few times I had tried AI, it created more work than if I did it myself. I ended up rewriting extensively. The most important reason to me though is environmental. It uses so much water. I can see using AI to create tools that benefit all of humanity, such as scientific research or medical breakthroughs. But to edit a marketing blurb, nope. But on the other side of things, authors who are using generative AI are applying it to a wide range of use cases. So among those people, 81% use it to conduct research. The other top uses are creating marketing materials and outlining or plotting. Some examples for this can be drafting out ideas to see if they're marketable before rewriting, generating plot and plot twist ideas, refining word choice, making grammar corrections, drafting passages and scene descriptions, generating character names. It's all still reviewed and accepted or rejected to stay within this person's voice and vision. This person says that they might have found themselves stuck for days trying to resolve problems, but now they feel like they have a writing partner who always has advice and suggestions. And then for the authors who felt conflicted about AI use, some of them agree that it's unethical to write an entire book, but they would be interested in using it to brainstorm copy for ads and for blurbs. Some people think if you're using it to read your own work so that you can edit it, that's okay. Other people even say that using AI is not substantially different than asking someone like an editor or friend or writing partner for help and ideas. And then I'm going to read some quotes for other people who had said that they believe AI doesn't add value to their work. Part of the joy of writing novels is doing it myself. Where's the fun getting AI to do it? AI has enough glitches that when it gets things wrong, which it inevitably does, it only creates more work for me. I have my own style and I feel AI is too bland for what I want to achieve. I have been writing all of my life. I love the process and I love that every book is a new challenge full of learning opportunities. Even if AI was ethical, not harmful to the environment, and not trying to destroy people's livelihoods, I would not use it. I would not rob myself of the joy and the learning opportunities that come with writing and the creative process. But on the flip side, there are authors who actually find that using AI helps their creativity and efficiency. Some of the quotes say that their creative processes have exploded with new ideas and storylines. They feel like they have a brainstorming partner and sounding board for their ideas. The advice they get back isn't always good, but it still often sparks an idea that can get them past moments of writer's block. It's also very efficient because they used to spend hours doing research and creating names, and now they can get it done in a few minutes. Some people see it like an assistant or even a ghostwriter at times. Some people see AI as an excellent collaborator because they can talk about plot or toy around with character profiles or work through structural templates. Another thing authors do is outsourcing marketing and admin tasks to AI. So they find it very helpful for providing marketing copy, especially if there's like a word count. They can do taglines, short elevator pitches. They can create eye-catching images for marketing on social media. There's so many use cases that they can do with AI, whether that's character images, book trailers, social media assets, content for newsletters. ChatGPT is the most popular platform among authors using AI, with 85% of authors using it, followed by Anthropic's Claude, which is 54%, and the editing software Pro Writing Aid, which is 50%. But the most alarming statistic, again, that I will emphasize is that most people using AI do not disclose their AI use to readers. That is 74% of the authors that were surveyed here. Of the 26% who do disclose it, most are doing so via their email newsletter, social media, website, or blog. And the reason why people don't disclose it is because they say that they don't use it to write. They use it only to brainstorm social media posts or research or schedules. Someone said, I don't disclose how the sausage is made because I don't think it's helpful for readers to know which craft books I've read, whether I use a hard copy of the Chicago Manual of Style or a grammar tracking app, whether I use a writer's critique group or AI to bounce story ideas off of, or which editors and proofreaders I use. Would readers really want to know all that? I think they just want a good story story to read. Honestly, it's no one's business if I use AI. The stories are all me. I'm the director. I'm the storyteller. These language models don't give great output if you don't already know your craft, just like many authors don't disclose a ghostwriter. But the common fear of authors, regardless of whether they use AI or not, is the concern that technology is going to devalue their books and make it harder for writers, artists, narrators, translators, and other creative people to earn a living from their work, which I do find ironic for the people who are using AI but might have those concerns, because you're feeding into the machine that you're worried is going to make you obsolete. So I don't quite understand the logic there. But another fear that people have is failing to adapt will put them at a bigger risk. Some people believe that it's important to embrace and understand new technology, and if AI is here to stay, we might as well learn how to use it. But a common sentiment that authors agree on throughout the survey is that it still takes skill and practice to write good books. Some people see that as a reason to reject AI altogether, but other people see that as more reassurance that the technology, whether they use it or not, isn't ultimately going to replace them or doesn't really discredit them as writers, because ultimately it's their vision and creativity. They treat it like a tool that will give them free time, hence they can write. So it's better for them to use it for admin tasks, save themselves the hours, and be able to focus on writing. Again, this is a survey that could be biased in the way that they've sampled the authors. The demographics of the authors could also be very skewed. We already know that the majority of the people who answered were self-published authors. I would be very curious to hear what traditional authors are doing, but these types of surveys, even existing, are only based on people who are willing to admit that they use AI. So I want to use this last section of the video to talk about why people are doing this and go a little bit beyond what the survey has said. I have like a couple of theories for why this is happening. One reason is that a lot of people like publishing books, but not everyone likes writing. It's very different to say that you wrote a book and you have a book and you have your name attached to it and you have like a product that you can be proud of, versus really committing to the very grueling, draining process of writing. I think a lot of people like thinking about stories rather than the process of writing them. Writing them takes so many hours. You really have to sit down. Even when it's a piece of shit, it's so much more fun thinking about it, and it's so much harder to really try to execute it and see that it doesn't come alive in the same level and quality as the idea in your mind. I also think something that many writers have is insecurity about their own writing and their own abilities. Again, you may have a great idea in your head, but your writing capabilities might not match up to it. And so when you see a program like ChatGPT, it can be seen as a tool, or I would argue a crutch, to help with your insecurity. But the problem with using a crutch all the time is that it doesn't give you the room to properly practice your craft. People get impatient when they're writing or they're drawing or whatever technical skill doesn't live up to their idea, which I totally understand. But I would encourage people to think about it a little differently. Even though your writing or your drawing or whatever may have flaws, and it will always have flaws because it can always be better. I think part of the beauty in writing a book or creating something is that it's a reflection of the stage of life that you're in, and it's a reflection of you earnestly trying to do something and committing to that, especially when this is something you're doing in your free time. I'm assuming it's not your job or not like a full-time job. So you're really putting in the effort to do something of your own accord that is not part of capitalism, hopefully. Like, hopefully you're not part of the authors that are churning out a bunch of books on Amazon to try to get a quick buck. Assuming you care about this story, right? This is something where you can really claim this was 100% you. And so I find it a shame that using AI would discredit from that. And again, I feel like having a piece of art that is a reflection of your stage in life, even if it's flawed or not technically great, that is its own version of success for you. So for example, without spoiling too much from my book, because, you know, I haven't announced it yet, my book was heavily inspired by my experience with depression. And it's been really rewarding for me to get to the final stages now of getting ready to announce this book and getting into like the marketing part of it, because I can look back at this and see, wow, like this is such a reflection of the struggles I've had with my mental illness through these aspects of my life when I was a young adult. And I can see how in the revisions and redrafting process and all the rewrites that I've done, how that reflects the older years that I've experienced growing up and seeing more of the world and coming to understand my depression and how I can heal from that, and just having like a broader scale of things. Like, I feel like the story grows along with you, and I feel like AI taints it because it's not not a reflection of you. Instead, it was something that you did because you don't feel secure enough in your writing for it to be shitty. And it's okay for your writing to be shitty if it was like done by you. I think it would be a shame to let AI programs take that away. Now, when it comes to using AI for like plotting or researching or any step in the writing process, I was talking about this with a friend because she has a coworker who is writing a book for fun on the side. But this coworker told her that they are heavily leaning on AI for their research buddy. So for example, they would ask ChatGPT, what hotel would a character like this stay in while visiting Paris? Is this how a fluent French speaker would order a pastry? They use AI like an editor when they are brainstorming character motivations. They ask questions like, do you think I could use this insight in chapter 10? And they talked about this experience very positively. They said that they have a whole new level of appreciation for how much work goes into discovering the story past what you think initially is. And that is super fun. I love that process too. But my hot take is, even when you are using it as a tool or a research partner or a brainstorming partner, I still don't think that's a good enough reason to use AI. And I'm not even accounting like the ethics of it with stealing or the environmental impacts. I'm just saying that when AI is scraping from things that already exist, you can just look up those things yourself. I completely understand the reasoning and drive for many people to use it because it provides shortcuts and answers. Is it more efficient compared to like actually Googling stuff and like sifting through a bunch of websites? Yes, sure, but like you don't even know if the information is accurate. And I would also argue that part of the discovery process is the curiosity in learning about those things in the first place. This is a shortcut, but it doesn't enrich the creative process. So I think that people want stories to reflect humanity or something that feels true or intrinsic to you. Instead of asking AI, is this how a fluent French speaker would order a pastry, or what hotel would this character use to stay in Paris, it would be more effective to actually immerse yourself in those experiences with doing the research, with curiosity, and talking to those people who have those experiences and understanding their stories, having conversations with real people, traveling to different places, and generally living your life. That's something that AI cannot give you. That's part of why there are sensitivity readers for books, to make sure that the characters feel authentic and true to those lived experiences. All right, I'm back home, so I'm just gonna finish this video with my thoughts from here. But my personal opinion is that I don't think there is any good reason to use AI for creating art. Part of writing a book is the research and thought and care that you put into it. Trying to do shortcuts that also take from other artists without their consent seems to be the antithesis of that. At the same time, I completely understand the reasoning and drive for so many people to use it though. We have something that provides shortcuts and answers in a world where we have all of these institutions like school and work and capitalism. All of these different institutions demand efficiency rather than taking the time for thoughtful exploration. So when you're already used to operating under that model, naturally you would try to apply the same thing for writing a book. But I think when you can take the time to thoughtfully explore these things, it's always better to do so. I think about how a musician who samples another musician's song does so for a specific reason to inform their art. There's a purpose to it. Whereas a musician who would use AI to scrape a conglomeration of a bunch of different songs and lyrics is a different scenario because it's doing a shortcut and not actually contributing to the creative process. There's less of a purpose to it. You don't know where the sources are coming from, and therefore you're not actually learning along the way. Also, even if you didn't care about like the purity of art or like the ethics of using AI, I also feel like the art from AI is just so ass. It's diluted, it's generic, and it's just overall shittier quality that it doesn't do the idea that you have in your mind justice. Even using AI as an editor pretty much scrapes from writing resources that already exist for writers and editors, but it would be diluted to generic editing rather than an actual human editor that would understand the context of your story and the themes and what you're really trying to go for more innately. Because ultimately, since AI scrapes from the rest of the internet and doesn't get things right a lot of the time, it's only gonna funnel from generic patterns of questions and editing tips. At the same time, I understand not having the resources for traveling for immersion or resource, or not having enough money for like editors or sensitivity readers. But I think even doing things like searching TikTok for popular Paris hotels and choosing one that fits the character's goals and aesthetics is just as accessible as ChatGPT. Sure, ChatGPT is faster than trying other methods of searching for information, but you're essentially trading in quick information and answers for convenience at the expense of your work and your art being more generic and possibly even factually incorrect. I think the reason why art that's created by AI feels so soulless and doesn't actually save as much time as you think is because when you are creating this art, but you're relying on AI, you're not really flexing your creative muscles and getting that practice needed in order to be a better artist. When you are any type of artist, whether you're a writer, visual artist, designer, whatever, you need to experience being shitty at something and being comfortable with that, because that is the only way that you're gonna get better. I think AI delays those things because you are putting off working through being shitty and now you're embracing it with shitty AI art. Essentially, you're hitting a redo button over and over, hoping to get something that you like or will be passable. Ultimately, I think the dependency on AI really shows how many people value the final output rather than the creative process or curiosity or immersion of whatever it is they're trying to do, which is understandable considering how society is set up for valuing efficiency over everything else. But I think when you are writing a book, this is not something that you would be doing to make a quick buck. Of course, there are going to be people out there that will quickly churn out AI stuff in order to make money really quickly, as I have discussed before. But let's say that you are like a person who is genuinely interested in writing a book, telling your stories. You're not doing this because it's going to pay you shit, because it definitely won't. You're doing it because you like it and you care about it. And so I would encourage people to question the temptation to seek AI, because is that really a priority on the final output? And are you doing yourself a disservice by not valuing the journey and creative process along the way? And I say this as someone who does actively hate the creative process. I hate drafting a story so much. It feels like pulling out teeth. But at the same time, I feel like I have to write it for similar reasons as why I wouldn't hire a ghostwriter, because this is my idea and I feel like I need to write it and have something that I feel like I can own completely. While it is true that people are squeezed for time, we also have to recognize that AI being presented to us as a tool to make things more efficient is essentially just these tech companies selling us the solutions to the problems that they created in the first place. So yeah, you can keep on saying that you don't have enough time and pretend like you have no other choice but to use the tool. But if that were the case, you should also acknowledge that you are being played like a tool to these tech companies as well. I think that there are two big buckets of how people approach writing books. I think some people like the idea of being an author and having a platform and going to events. They like the idea of having their name attached to a book and getting to say that they wrote a book. They like the idea of having their own business as an author, in which case it makes sense why you would turn to AI, because this is something where you are only concerned with output with no regard for the process of making something. I think that's something that people should own up to. Me personally, I still don't think that's worth the effort to do all of that, but evidently some people do. And I think for the other bucket of people who are genuinely interested in the process of writing, but maybe feel more insecure about their skills or feel really pressed for time, it is something that, I can see people doing on the down low and not advertising about it. It's one of those things where you need to ask yourself, what are my priorities here? I'm rushing to get a book done. Why? Is it because I feel like I have to release this amount of books per year? Is it because I feel like I gotta publish before I turn this certain age? What is the reason why you are turning to this shortcut rather than putting in the time and work to do so? If you are a writer who is not on a deadline and you don't have this as a full-time job and you don't want your motivation to be based on external things like money or clout or whatever, what is the core reason for your commitment to do the grueling, long act of writing a book? And I think based on that core reason, that should inform whether AI is right for you. Ethics aside, social stigma aside, I can't tell people that they should or shouldn't write AI, but I guess I just want to encourage people to reevaluate their priorities and primary purpose for why they want to write a book in the first place. For me personally, I think a great reason for writing a book and putting in the time to do so, even though it sucks so much ass, both the process and who knows, maybe even the writing itself, is because ultimately it's something that you and I did on our own free time, even when we were bogged down by work and life, and we live in a world that constantly demands efficiency and productivity and something to sell. This is like our own personal project where we got to focus solely on what we were interested in. Again, this is just my own personal anecdote from it, it, because I know there are other writers that really are just writing for the market and they just write whatever they think will sell better. And that's valid. But I think if you are in the same boat as I am, where you want to see writing as something where you would only commit to it if you really feel strongly about it, then I think that's a good reason for why you don't need to rely on AI, because ultimately this is going to be a story that you should feel comfortable owning 100%. And it's not for the sake of getting published or for the sake of readers hopefully liking your book or not, but it's for your own sake. And I think that's a healthier way of looking at it, because then you don't feel pressured by external sources, and then you can focus on what really matters, which is just like enjoying yourself and creating something that truly and fully belongs to you and your mind and your own inspirations, not whatever a robot or AI just spat out to you. So that's my whole spiel. If you made it this far, I would love to hear what you think about using AI in writing, whether you are a writer or a reader or just a third-party observer, because this is definitely going to be more and more of a thing in publishing and in other industries. And I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye.